Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone, wherever you may be tuning in today's episode from around the globe. We are here at the 2025 ARA Show in Las Vegas, today being episode number 5 and the episode. I'm accompanied by a man who needs no introduction, one of the most well-known and most connected individuals in the global equipment rental industry. When the words equipment rental and New York City are mentioned, the name Durante almost always follows. The Durante family has been servicing the New York City and tri-state construction industry since 1969. Pioneers a true dynasty, cementing a legendary status within the rental industry, rental community, and truly encapsulate what it means to live the equipment rental lifestyle. Founder, past CEO, chairman, and man behind Durante Rentals, which was recently acquired by Herc, causing quite the shake-up in June of 2024. For many years, the American Rental Association's Region 1 Director, approaching 33 years of equipment rental experience, an Inc. 5000 Hall of Fame inductee, a 7 consecutive year inductee among North America's fastest growing companies, named the King of Queens in 2015, a father to 2 adorable young children who definitely take after their mother, and someone I'm fortunate enough to consider a newly gained friend over the past years. A market mover, innovator, self-proclaimed spiritual gangster, but mutually regarded legend of the equipment rental industry. I'd like to finally welcome Anthony Durante. Welcome to the Rental Journal.
Wow, what an intro. Thank you, Mike. Thank you. Half of it true.
I think more than half. But Anthony, we've spent quite a bit of time together across New York City over the past 2 years, visiting a few of your Durante rental branches in 2023, a mandatory New York-style pizza with your dad, and grabbing a Sabret's hot dog on Times Square, and ATV cabin adventures in the snow. Myself going for a ride-along and jumping across multiple construction sites in Manhattan. Anthony, like I mentioned, the name Durante has cemented quite the legendary status nationally. You know, I saw your cousin John featured as a guest during the ARA's education on Tuesday, and you definitely can't mention New York City in the rental industry without hearing the name Anthony Durante. Your uncle started the original Durante Rentals in 1969. You jumped in as a teenager in 1990, 1991. Steve joined the business shortly after in 94. Yep. To then being acquired by United in June of 2000, to starting your first venture in Gotham Equipment Rentals, which transitioned into Durante Rentals in 2009, laying your foundation in the rental community. You said that the success of our business and resultant growth was reflected in 40 to 80% annual increases that qualified us among the top 5 fastest growing rental businesses in North America, and the only one in that group that started with less than $10 million in seed funding, growing to your 3rd location in only 28 months, seeing immense organic growth in your operation for the next decade, but seeing extreme growth following the acquisition of Iron Source in Delaware, resulting in 10 locations across New York City, New Jersey, Connecticut, and over 100 employees, and joining the ARA's market mover list in 2023, achieving total rental revenues exceeding $365 million and a projected 75 alone in 2024. To last year on the 18th of June, Durante Rentals was acquired by Herc. And now yourself in 2025 with over 33 years living the construction equipment rental lifestyle. Mate, congratulations on the recent acquisition. I'm sure everyone's looking finally for an update and to hear the news from your perspective, but what a journey, and run me through this recent change and your journey in the rental industry.
Wow, you definitely got my bio covered. Thank you very much for your diligent research. So yeah, where do we jump in? Sold the business in June to Herc. I had private equity partners, Clairvest, that we had brought in 2019. I would say it was a successful private equity partnership. We were side rail a little bit by COVID. We hit our goals, our 5-year goals. We hit the mark on when we wanted to sell the business. Now that the business has been gone, when we had Durante Rentals, which John, myself, Chris Jones started in 2009, I started developing statistics, metrics, dashboards. Baseball statistics has always been a love of mine since I'm a wee lad. And I've been able to build out, dashboards that are unlike anything that's out in the market. I was able to have a 360 perspective on the company. So what I did now that I've sold is I've had a lot of friends that, they hit me up and they want me to consult with them and give them advice. I am bringing the dashboards to them, and they're kind of like, well, we wanted you, not necessarily the dashboards, but the way I look at a company is through dashboards. So if I'm going to look at somebody's business, if I don't see it through the optics that I'm used to seeing it, then I can't really tell them what's wrong with their business. You'd have to spend a week or more in their organization, walking through their shops, talking to their employees. Instead, if you have the right metrics and you put the right metrics up, you can just, read them and see where the deficiencies are. And if the metrics are proper, you could pretty much tell personalities of people or departments based on the metrics. So I just started a company called The Owl, and it's a data business. Right now, we're looking to partner with software companies before we approach the end user market. But it basically is dashboards and data that gives you much faster decision-making ability. So what traditionally would take dozens of minutes or even hours to comprise a rental report of some of the data that you have to extract from the system and then still scrub it and format it correctly, we basically reduce all of that cycle time and give you an analysis of a department, complete analysis of a department, pretty much on one screen, and in seconds you can do it. Takes you a long time with a lot of the software that's out there.
Anthony, yourself and Steve were extremely close growing up, only 16 months apart, but also both fascinated in statistics and data, like you mentioned, reading the encyclopedia like it was a fiction novel, accumulating a memory bank of stats on every building along the New York City skyline, knowing their heights to the inch, the year of construction they were completed, the exact number of floors, and the architect behind the concept. A big Yankees fan, being able to rattle off every player going back to the 1920s, wins, strikeouts, home runs, batting average, you name it, beating your brain with data, a thirst for information, and Steve saying that you're a true info junkie. Anthony, like you're saying, you've never lost this love for pure data, and this ability was the primary contributor to the success of Durante Rentals for so many years. Now leading into this next venture, and obviously never satisfied, never giving up, and never stopping within the rental industry. And whilst this dream of being a baseball statistician never materialised, bringing these metrics and these custom dashboards and spending last night with yourself and your partner John, flowing perfectly into this new venture, The Owl. So what are your plans for the future?
One thing I do want to say, you had said that the metrics really drove the business. I think that's a bit of a discredit to my partners and to the team. I like to think of a scoreboard as more of just monitoring what drive other people are applying, right? It's not that the scoreboards are necessarily driving the company, but they're measuring the company. And whatever you measure is usually what people increase. So yes, the dashboards were a vital part, but at the end of the day, all I was doing was measuring. What I've done since, with my time off lately is we've taken those dashboards though, and we've actually made them with predictive analysis. So now the dashboards are able to predict forward. And I went back with some of the Durante Rentals KPIs and modeling, and when we ran that, being able to predict the future is really gold. So a lot of the software out there is really just an insights board. You pull the data and it just tells you sometimes what you're doing in a month or a day or a year, but it's not telling you what your budget was or where you were last year, where you should be going to. So our data really tries to just bridge that so that owners can decide what they need. It puts the decisions that they need to make in front of them so they don't have to mine for their company to learn and know where they have to address. They have all that in front of them. And not only does it give them what they need to look at, but at times it gives them what they could expect in the future with the current rate or with the change that they make.
Anthony, growing up, you never missed an opportunity to spend the day at your father's iron workshop, just a tape measure's distance away from Shea Stadium. It was there where you developed a regimen of hard work, long hours, a passion for New York City infrastructure, the city's history and its people. Chatting with Steve in December, he mentioned that the New York City rental landscape looked very different back in the 90s. There was definitely no national companies. Everything was independent. There was no internet. Nobody was buying 2-cycle oil or a shovel off Amazon. Everything the contractor brought was from the local rental operator. They showed up at the door, purchased it directly from a rental store. But now looking at the present day, we're seeing exponential growth and a national evolution of the US rental industry, like Steve mentioning that Herc has doubled in size since he left in 2020, and even seeing the ARA increasing by 20% annually. Take me back to 1991. What did the New York City rental industry look like more than 30 years ago?
It was very wild, wild west at work. It was not structured. There was not data. Barely, some people didn't even have computer systems at that time. And like you said, my favorite part was when a contractor would come in and grab a wheelbarrow and go shopping the days before the Home Depot. It was a lot of fun. There was a lot of inventory back then. Now you don't need to keep the same inventory levels. I mean, I could sit here for an hour and talk about the 90s and what we went through. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, it's definitely changing. Everything's a lot more lean. The competition's getting smarter. United Rentals and the other nationals are really leading the way in knowing every little bit about their business. And hopefully my partner, John Feliciano, and I, hopefully that's what we want to bring to the independents, is kind of how to compete with United and Herc. But I also do believe that our data is a little bit different, whereas they're more of a big battleship that's harder to turn. I think that, you know, we can add some really cool and unique metrics that the nationals aren't tracking. And the way that I look at that is, you know, it's like having an airplane that's 100 years old. You know, some people have some basic gauges. What we're trying to bring is more of like when you turn on ESPN and you see heat maps and stuff like that. So I think that data, AI, policies, procedures, safety, employee retention, I mean, all of that has evolved 20x since the 90s. I mean, it's amazing, the sophistication. So, but I think as an industry, we're doing pretty good with adapting to the change.
You said that when you started Durante Rentals back in 2009, following the GFC, you were able to purchase a large amount of equipment with extremely low usage for cents on the dollar. Starting with a new fleet at a lower cost basis enabled you to not only begin operations, but gave you a solid footing in the early days of the business. Anthony, run me through the challenges of building and scaling a rental business, especially in the New York City construction industry, from building relationships, gaining multi-billion-dollar infrastructure project accounts, the biggest construction stage in the world, as you've described it, and playing the real game of New York City construction.
You know, one of the biggest challenges with New York is you can have a great industry that's rapidly growing like rental, and yet in New York it kind of gets lost in the shuffle. It's not Manhattan sexy. You know, if you're making 150K, you're barely middle class. I mean, so there's recruitment challenges, there's logistic challenges. But for the most part, I mean, I love New York because if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere, truly. I always liked working around people in New York because you work on a scale that's beyond what other cities experience. So when you need to level up and get advice on how to be a better sales rep, there's somebody in the city that's done that or been on a large job. So the mentorship that I've received from New York has really been incredible. I think it's somewhat easy only because I can't imagine doing business anywhere else. If you throw a rock, you're hitting a job site. And I think that was part of the secret to our success too.
Anthony, everything that you've just mentioned with this accumulated experience over 3 decades, you really understand not only the world of rental, but especially what makes a successful independent. Something that Elliot and I were discussing earlier this week during his featured episode was the increasing emphasis and implementation and prioritization of data and dashboards and centered around data-centered decision-making in all of our rental stores, but we also need to consider the relationship aspect of rental. How have you seen all of this data that we're really flooded with and these dashboards? How can these dashboards really simplify before we optimize, and especially help independents lay a roadmap for their stores with visible data, but with context? Because data without context is useless.
Yeah, I think what Elliot's doing is great, and I think the industry needed it, so I'm glad to see he's got a lot of success with that. My take on dashboards is that when you put a scoreboard up, half of the team will start to move in the right direction. And out of the other half, you're going to get half of them, you're going to have to coach them to success, and another half is probably going to, you know, get exposed, or they might not like data, they might like somebody watching them. But also, when you make a commitment to put data to your business, you're making a commitment that you're going to drive towards certain goals. As opposed to a general feeling of, are we doing good or bad? You are staking a number in the ground. Right now, when we go in and people are data deficient, they don't know which one of their reps are performing correctly or not. And yes, you can look at a year over year, you know, with accounts, but usually when there's 10 reps, 150 accounts, 50 of them haven't done business in the last 12 months, it makes it very difficult for an owner to decide, how do I slice and dice, cut this into small pieces, and then I can tackle those small rocks. Again, if you put a dashboard up and half the people start moving in the right direction, well, right off the bat, you don't have to work on those people. Usually whatever you inspect is what they're going to respect. So again, I think the dashboards, they don't necessarily tell people what to do. They can certainly point, but the owners still need to drive the sales managers, and the sales managers still need to drive, you know, their sales reps. But again, I really think with a scoreboard, you can look and see much faster where you have to look, as opposed to using gut and feel. As owners are getting larger and companies are getting larger, sometimes owners, when they lose touch, they feel like I need to know my business even more. No, that's the opposite. You knew your business well. You knew it well enough to grow it to this size.
Step back.
You grew up, you're in the trench, right? At 10 locations, the thing is not to dive back in. You won't get to 20. The thing is you actually have to step back. And again, as I said earlier, the right dashboards really should enable you. I mean, at least with our dashboards, you can sit from 20 feet away from a screen, not know anything about that business, never step foot in it, never had a conversation with anybody in it. And the right dashboards, you should be able to look at it and pick up the trends, know what they need to work on, all from 20 feet away, not seeing a name, not seeing a number. The right dashboard should visually draw you to what you need to look at. And then obviously from there as an owner, you got to make the tough decisions.
Anthony, growing up in a rental store is quite the interesting dynamic. During my chat with Steve, he laid out what he characterised as the Durante week in the life, especially in those younger years. Clock in at 6 a.m. or earlier. At 6 o'clock, there's already trucks lined up at the door. The quote-unquote working hours of the day usually finished at 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night during the week. Saturdays were 6 to 3 and you called it a half day. Steve said that for your uncle, the customer was everything, that the business was built around the customer and personal relationships, that your stock equipment was always based on the personal inquiry, saying that you never did it out of doing more hours to make more money. It was always about being true to the business, being true to the industry, and most importantly, satisfying your customers. That there was no easy days, 80-hour work weeks, never spent at home or days called in sick. The daily grind driven by passion, and there's no difference between a Monday and a Sunday. It's 7 days a week, 24/7. Anything, yourself and your extended family to this day are still living this dedicated lifestyle and an environment that I also know too well. You can't open up a coffee shop or a restaurant. New York City construction rental, that's what you do, it's who you are. And I think it flows perfectly into your continued dedication for what you're doing now in the industry.
Thank you. I mean, what I find interesting is, John Durante, when he sold out his shares in 2019, he opened up in Florida, and he's been one of the market movers, one of the fastest growing in the country. Steve at Herc was one of the top salesmen, a few years back. I'd like to think, though, that, we learned correctly from my Uncle John. He was amazing, very detail-oriented, knew how to do everything right. Our whole mentality was always, if you do the small things right, they'll translate into the big things. Sometimes, we worked with plenty of people where they shoot for the home runs, right? They swing big, but then they miss big. And sometimes, that has a trickle-down effect to the team, to your ops team. There could be frustration inside versus outside. So we've always, had an eye on growth revenue, but at the same token, making sure that the systems and the people behind us were backfilled with the proper training. So I do give a lot of credit to the teams we had. I think we had tremendous teams. We've always put together bad news bears. That's kind of, as an independent in New York, that's what you do. But you do the best to find the diamonds in the rough, polish them up, put a uniform on them and put them out there. So as much as we've had success, I think we owe a lot to the people that we've worked with.
Mate, Durante Rentals' core values were dependable, caring, innovative, and positive. And something that I always noticed on all of your social media posts was always the word local on every single one. Anthony said that our success was attributed to clear communication, respect for oneself, co-workers and customers, with superior customer service and an old school way of doing business coupled with cutting edge ideas and technology. That delivering on these principles is what set Durante Rentals apart from other rental businesses. Mate, even after growing to 100 employees, you still knew every team member's name across every location that you had, describing it as true intimacy in a family business environment, affecting people's personal and professional lives, and individual growth was always a paramount item on your to-do list, and describing it as a symbolic relationship that kept the journey interesting. Even thinking back to my ride along with Steve when we went across Manhattan, it was like watching Ronald McDonald flipping burgers on the grill. He was absolutely in his element, developing relationships, and he was closing deals and providing value from the outset, displaying this personal relationships that he was building, and still the power of the independent in 2025 or 2023 at that stage. But how do you achieve pairing the enhancements that are gained from modern technologies whilst also retaining this old school and local independent feel?
So, yeah, I know somebody recently told me, he says, I'm the best at what I do in my shop, in my job. And he says, your dashboards would be something I wouldn't look at because, it probably wouldn't tell the right story for what I do. And I said to him, well, that's actually not correct. If you are working correctly, the dashboard will reflect your success. So I think from my perspective, and at least what the next chapter is how do, I help rental houses move into the next evolution, I would say that again, it's marrying up to data. If we're going to evolve the industry, or anybody's going to evolve, the first thing we have to do is we have to know where we were. And a lot of the data doesn't tell us that. It's where are we and where are we going? Everybody needs to put a stake in the ground. They need to know in X amount of years, this is the revenue I'm going to do, and then work backwards from there. And again, like even with a department, if somebody's like, well, I'm struggling in my department, what metrics do you have on it? An employee without metrics might think he's doing correct, and an owner might see something different. And if you don't have metrics that are watching certain things every day, it could be 2 months down the road, and now you're course correcting 2 months later after the team developed a habit, and you have a manager saying, well, I didn't know I was doing it wrong all along. Metrics really puts everybody on the same page. I don't think that any innovation, really hindered the employee-employer relationship. I know we put cameras in the buildings, everybody had an issue with that. We put cameras in the truck, everybody had an issue with it. But at the end of the day, if an entrepreneurial owner is true in his heart on his goal and his intention, those tools are not there to scare your team or to advance you in technology, but not your team. It's all boats rise. All people move forward. The advancement in technology should be shared with your employees, and certain technologies should be used to support your employees. So, for example, somebody one time said, you never invest in my location, you never give us a budget, it's everybody else. And that location was doing less than all the others. So we gave it less attention, we gave it less resources, and it got to a point where I said, do me a favor, we're going to start working a clicker. And we started working a clicker, and I said to him, if you can count for me the number of people that come in the day, we'll start to make a budget for that number of customers. And now we know our traffic flow. We also knew that there was a competitor that was going to be opening up in the area, so we were able to monitor the before and the after. We were able to get the employee buy-in without him really knowing. However, every time that they would have customers coming in, they were celebrating it because they got another click. And by celebrating it, they were giving them a little bit extra customer experience. They were happy to see the customer who walked in. They were smiling. They weren't on the cell phones. And in a couple of months, part of it due to seasonality, but through their effort, is they started to increase that number. And as a result, we then painted their location. Now, are we going to do it anyway? Very possibly. But guess what? That person thought that the success that he helped drive was the reward that we gave him. So I think, again, there's 100 different ways that technology comes into play, but I think that you need to, the keynote today had said it, just about how every single technology that has ever come into human existence, right, whether it was a phone, radio, TV, AI, it's always going to destroy us. But at the end of the day, I think that owners and employees, if they take the step up and the commitment to get to the next step of data, it's not a big brother's watching, and data can be used to take the high performers and celebrate them, and take the low performers and not just recognize them so that they can have increased training, but recognize them faster to the problem and not 6 months later when they have that bad habit.
Anthony, you recently thanked your loyal customers who supported the company even with the large pool of options and increasing competition, that you ask everyone that they continue to support local independent businesses, and mentioning that publicly companies, the big five, are a real threat to the longevity of the local independent, promoting that customers reward good service with competitive pricing during their decision making. Anthony, not uniquely to the US, but globally, we're seeing such aggressive acquisition strategies and massive moves by the big five, or big four now that United's acquired H&D over the past couple of weeks leading into the show. But even ARA President Jeff Crotto also mentioned the insane M&A activity in a recent ARA article, saying that it seems like every week in Rental Pulse, I read about at least one new transaction. Anthony, what is the impact this has had on the US rental industry, and how have you seen the rental landscape develop or change with the reduction of the little guy and the reduction of smaller independents?
Well, an interesting stat that Tony Conan brought up today at the keynote was that we actually went from 2019 to today, we went from 11,000 locations to 13,000 locations. So location-wise, and I don't know if that's independent, but locations are increasing, and the number of rental houses was in the low 5,000 a few years ago. Now it's over 6,000 for the first time. So, while you can paint a bleak picture that, the strong are getting stronger and the top is consolidating and they're getting smarter and they're taking good policies and rolling them out across the country, there is a good story for the independent. I do believe, though, that the independents, if you look at most of our leading independents, the market moves, who's who, you'll notice that most of that list is second or third generation. So obviously there's something to be said about growing up in this business. But at the same token, when I talk to a lot of leaders, they feel that their market is kind of matured to where it's at. And if I look at their city and they got 150,000 people and only one national company, regardless of how many independents, if they have only one national company, there is room for a second national company to come in. Once that happens, then you kind of get like a little snow globe effect. You know, shake it, turn it upside down, and everything is in chaos. So I do think that as much as, you know, there's a lot of positive and optimism, I do think that, you know, between Home Depot, you know, really going after the 24/7 customer, the small contractor, the homeowner, and I do think that with United and Sunbelt and Herc getting smarter at the top, I do think that the zone of comfort is shrinking and the time to be comfortable is shrinking. And I think that people need to at least accept or see what is going to happen with their market in 10 or 5 years. And I think that, you know, a lot of people really never grew up thinking like that. You know, and people like Elliott, Dan Crowley's peer groups, you know, these are people that are really educating people and kind of, it's not a shock to the system. You know, it's not the sky is falling, but at the same token, in 2025 as an industry, we are a little bit behind in terms of technology. So I think that a shock to the system isn't necessary, almost like a wake-up call, but at least you might not have data today. It doesn't mean you have to go out today and immediately do it. However, you should have a 5 or 10 year plan, and that 5 or 10 year plan should include, you know, what's your exit strategy? Are you going to pass it on to somebody else? Are you going to sell it to your employees? Are you going to sell it to a national? And if so, how many locations and what are you going to have? And then back engineer that all the way up to today and make that plan and stick to it. And at least if you're killing the plan, you know you got secret sauce. And if you're below the plan, then you got to, you know, kind of think of plan B options. But again, overall, I think the industry is extremely healthy. It's a great industry. I absolutely love it. And let me tell you, this industry for friendships is by far the best. As you mentioned earlier, I've been an ARA, American Rental Association. I was, you know, regional director. For anybody listening, especially in the U.S., if the ARA is asking you to do something, raise your hand and do it. You know, that also, again, is in some ways not just volunteerism, but that also is bringing information back to your company. That's getting you into the next evolution of the rental business. If you feel that you're on an island and you don't know how to level up or step up to meet the demands of 2025, either get involved with Dan Crowley's peer group or get involved with ARA, and you will quickly be in the bloodstream and quickly increasing. So I gave a lot on that answer. I mean, you hit me with a lot of information. I hope I answered all.
No, I think that flows perfectly into my next topic of the rental community, the ARA, and what you've done nationally in the rental industry. You said that we've built a brand that was known around the world due to our explosive growth and expert marketing, both of which were compounded by performing on the greatest construction stage in the world, New York City. I asked Steve, what would you describe as Anthony's impact on the rental industry? And he said that from Anthony's work with the ARA and sitting as regional president, he has connected with so many people, not only in the world of New York City, but nationally and globally. Anthony can make a best friend in 5 minutes. That's his personality. He's got the biggest inner circle I've seen in my life. He has an amazing strength in fostering culture and an ability to bring people together and a true passion. Anthony, you've been on quite the journey with the American Rental Association with your dedication to Region 1, time spent on the New York City board, and even being awarded the state chapter in 2016, building strong relationships and ties with industry leaders such as Matt Flannery, the current CEO of United Rentals during your time and work on Ground Zero with United Rentals and Branch H812, and following the 9/11 tragedy in 2001, working together on the cleanup and the equipment supply down on the lower side of Manhattan. Mate, how's your journey with the ARA, relationships with rental legends like Matt, helped you develop your network, contributed to your personal life, the success of Durante, and provided you a platform for this next venture?
Well, first, Steven said I can make a friend in 5 minutes because I think he might claim that he can make one in 4. So, of course, he has to one-up me. Wow, I don't think Steven's ever paid me that many compliments at one time, so it's nice to hear. Again, New York, as far as a stage and the people that perform on that stage is incredible. Yeah, you brought up Matt Flannery. I mean, Matt and the other guys, John Humphrey was my district manager back in 2000. It was a great opportunity to work there for 2 years. For those listening that might not know, but the local aerial company independent named McClinch was purchased by United back in the mid-90s. My uncle's company and our number one competitor were bought and merged together, which is actually branch A12, not 812. So A like Apple. So if anybody from United Rentals listening, the A12 Flushing location was half of my uncle's company. And, you know, it was a unique experience to be able to work with these guys that, you know, they were like my bosses. You know, McClinch guys are my bosses, and that was it. Little did I know, fast forward 15 years, that, you know, those are guys calling the shots and running it. So, you know, maybe I should have stayed with United for a little bit, but it was a great experience. I personally enjoy being the entrepreneur a lot more than the corporate person, but it's great to see their successes as well, so.
Anthony, you're extremely passionate about what you do, your love for the industry and love for the people. And it's celebrating your 30th year in the rental industry. You put up a LinkedIn post which reads, "It's not work. Again, it's lifestyle. Here's the 30 more." Each year, Durante grew by over 40%. It forced you as individuals and professionals to continue to develop at the same rate of personal growth in order to stay on top of the business. You recently dove into what you characterize as a feeling of loss paired with an immense feeling of gratitude and excitement after the acquisition of Durante, leading you into your next chapter, saying that you love your first house, but are excited to move into your bigger dream home. You want to advance to college, but you're sad to be leaving your old high school behind. Thanking your partner, Chris Jones, cousin John Durante, and your family for their contribution and unwavering dedication to your journey. Anthony, reflecting on what's truly been a captivating journey, yet unfinished journey so far, throughout your life and time in the industry, alongside these individuals that I just mentioned, who have been some key individuals, mentors, or people that have impacted your success?
Wow, okay, I like this one, thank you. And hopefully some of the people know the names, but I mean, definitely John Durante Sr., my Uncle John, as I said, my brother and my cousin, you know, pushing me, my brother Tommy for always being there with me on my side. You know, then running down the New York list of who's who, you got Joe Compitello, Viking Reps, Pat DeVito, Cardinal Sales, Mitch Garfinkel has always been a mentor to me. Bob Linikin of RPL, he sold to United the first time that we were merged. Then he sold another business to Herc. Bobby's always helped me with my career advice. John Milne is a good friend. My partner now, John Feliciano. I think I mentioned Chris Jones. You know, I meet regularly with a lot of the heads of the larger companies. I never really got to sit down with Larry Silber, despite him buying the business. Hopefully we could. But, you know, Kevin Fitzgerald, REIC, we've always stayed close. I think at one time we were almost the same size as him, and now he's got, I don't know, 40 locations. Kurt Barney definitely gets a shout out all the time. You know, probably the smartest guy in the industry under the age of 40, growing a monster of a company. Josh Nickel, always with the latest and greatest. Tony Conan, you know, great leadership, is awesome. You know, every time I'm around him, he just exudes something that I look to grab and make part of my own person. Chris Warman, definitely, you know, owe a lot to her. Definitely forgetting quite a few people, but you know, Brandon Horgan, always with great advice. You know, and a special shout out to Don Ahern. We never really sat down and had a conversation, but I needed something from him one time on a very small scale in our business, and he actually went way out of his way to accommodate the ask that we gave him when he didn't have to. So again, like even though these guys are giants in the industry as well, it was great that they've always afforded their time, and anything that you want to know, they've always been an open book. I mean, even United Rentals, you know, I'm in these groups that ARA organizes, and they are always willing to share their technology and what they're doing. It's amazing the transparency that they have. I mean, truly leaders in the industry. So I look at whoever is moving and shaking, that's kind of who I want to be around. If you find yourself around good people, you'll find you pick up good tips. We mentioned Elliot Vigil. I mean, he really came out in the past year and a half on the scene. My partner's Mitch Green at Clairvest. I mean, wisdom, a lot of wisdom. So anybody out there, if they're ever interested in private equity, you got Clairvest, you got Desmond Swamy at Kent Road Capital. Again, Mike, I learned from you. But yeah, I mean, I'm definitely missing some mentors, but I mean, that's the list.
Anthony, thank you. It's been truly amazing, a true honor. I wish you and your family everything and more. I'm so excited to see what's for you next? Your next chapter, our next catch up in the Big Apple, our next Brett's Hot Dog on the corner of 7th and 47th. Hopefully no more ATV recoveries, but I'm excited for future adventures together. Anthony, thank you for your time and thank you for coming on the Rental Journal.
Thank you, Mike.